Right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Committee of the Whole for February 22nd. It's 3 o'clock. We have all of council here in person except Councillor Inkster, who I understand will be joining us shortly and virtually. Council, is there anything in the way of conflicts or any amendments to our fairly short agenda? Hearing and seeing none, a motion please for adoption, and seconded, and all in favor, and carried. We'll move directly to our complicated agenda, and we have with us Kelly Foley and Ian Hall from the SCRD and Cover the Cause. If you can introduce yourselves. You know, I believe the camera that for you folks is right staring you in there. Yeah. So with that, without further ado, we'll turn the meeting over to you folks, please. Yeah, press that button and yes. Okay, great. The floor is yours. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Chair and Mayor. And thank you for the positive response to the offer to present to you on the Housing Action Plan. As a brief contextual introduction, before Kelly Foley will speak to the Housing Action Plan, I just wanted to share the road that got us to the conversation that we're having today. And it's a good news story. Thinking and working as a region over the last couple of years, the local governments on the coast have collaborated on initially a housing needs assessment. That was in 2020. And then work began to plan for implementing the work needed to move forward on the needs that were identified in that assessment, and that led to the hiring of a regional housing coordinator, Kelly, who we have here with us today. And one of the things that we asked the regional housing coordinator to prepare was the Housing Action Plan, and along the way, a parallel track of a community-led housing action table formed up, and the two streams of work have reinforced each other in a really positive way. And so the Housing Action Plan that you'll hear about in a moment benefits from both the coordinated input of all of the planners on the Sunshine Coast from 4 local governments, and also a tremendous amount of input from the folks on the Housing Action Table. So with that introduction, over to Kelly to speak to the action plan itself.
Perfect. Thanks.
Thanks for the opportunity to present today. My name is Kelly Foley. I'm with Cover the Coast, which is an initiative of the Sunshine Coast Affordable Housing Society. I work and support, as Ian mentioned, a regional leadership team that are vested in coming up with solutions for our housing crisis on the Sunshine Coast. So I have a quick presentation, and in the interest of time, I will employ my brevity as much as possible, but it will mean it'd be more of a highlight of... Go ahead. It's all right. There we go. Thank you. So the plan is a 1-year plan. It ends September of this year. It is intended to provide clear objectives, actions, timelines, and accountabilities. With an understanding of the critical need for housing in the community, it includes both short-term initiatives and long-term objectives. A lot of the work in the plan is already well underway. We're kind of doing the actions while we're doing the planning at the same time. It employs an integrated approach, as Ian spoke to. Really, that it involved a lot of organizations on the coast, not just members of the Housing Action Table, but organizations and community members outside of that. Even 2 planners from Vancouver Coastal Health volunteered their time to provide input and support for the development of the plan. Definitely it was informed by the Housing Needs Assessment and Implementation Framework, the Poverty Reduction Strategy Report that was done locally, a lot of research that I did looking at what other communities are doing and best practices, what their challenges and successes were. It's working. I'm saying it's working because we're not there yet, to employ what I call a data-informed and systems approach. Really what this means is that the actions that we're aligning in the plan, the objective, are based on knowledge, based on research. And with a limited amount of resources, I think we need to be very, very tactical and base our actions on knowledge. So this includes, work around needs assessment, asset mapping. I'll explain these later. A land inventory. We're also included in the plan are indicators to evaluate the outcomes, so that we're making certain that the work that we're doing is providing the results that we're hoping to achieve. Again, a coordinated housing system. This just so it shows my place in it, where I'm working very closely with the Housing Action Table. That's a very kind of integrated leadership team representing kind of the core housing system. There's a lot of work outside of this where we've done interviews with developers, partnerships with private sector contractors, working with people with lived experience to understand it from their perspective, what the needs are. So it's really trying to garner all that knowledge and expertise in the community to create a kind of a full picture of what needs to be done. The 4 priorities outlined in the plan are increase and protect rental housing stock, increase community housing and support services across the spectrum, expand, integrate, and connect those important home support and rental support programs that keep people housed. And lastly, enhance government policy frameworks. That section is the section that was entirely developed by this collaborative intergovernmental effort. In terms of the role of local government, there's a lot here where local government can provide support. I think number one really is, collaborations and partnerships. There's great work, as Ian mentioned, with local government representation on the Housing Action Table. I think there's opportunities to extend that, regionally and across sections. So really supporting those partnerships between nonprofits, private sector organizations, and local government. There's work around advocacy, particularly advocating to provincial and federal government to get resources and support required. There's work that can be done in terms of government processes and regulations, and kind of the obvious one in terms of funding and other resources. I'm not going to speak to each of those bullets. Those, they're going to require a little bit more time. I do want to say that my number one priority for those areas is the land use evaluation. We cannot build community housing if we do not have land. We cannot get support from federal or provincial government unless we have land. And the way the strategy to do that is to do a complete inventory of all the public and institutional land on the Sunshine Coast, including community buildings, old churches, institutional land, and assess it according to its appropriateness or its suitability for certain demographics. Obviously my purpose is for housing, but we can extend that lens to look at the appropriation of that property for other purposes. Many local governments, they look at it from they develop an asset management plan and look at the disposition of that property, either for community amenities or as an opportunity to create revenue. So that's my little pitch for that piece there. Other initiatives that have been going on, I think most of you are aware of the Housing Info Fair that happened in November. basically, that was an event that brought together all the expertise around building a secondary unit or auxiliary building and renting it out. So, property managers, contractors, et cetera. We've extended that, and we're actually partnering with all of those organizations to develop a webinar. So it will have all that information online, so people can, we'll probably do it in real time and then have it as a kind of a standalone afterward, so people can access that information at their leisure. I think I skipped one there. We have our essential workers housing registry. It's been up for a few months now. That is basically a registry that is dedicated to providing housing for people that work in essential service organizations. So it's kind of like this one-way portal. And yeah, it's been going very well. We have about 30 listings currently, and it's been a pretty steady stream of landlords who've been listing on that registry. As I mentioned earlier, the systems mapping and needs assessment, this is well underway. It's been quite an extensive project. I spent last week with a facilitator doing focus groups at Arrowhead with people who are houseless or have been houseless. And I wish everybody in this room could have been in that room. Like I tell you, like it's just life-changing when you actually speak to somebody who has that experience. But that knowledge and talking to people that are frontline workers and other people that are very much involved in the housing system will really help to inform what we need to do and what resources are required to do that effectively. It will also really help us in terms of advocacy and getting funding. The Resource Hub, that's Cover the Coast, and that's just an ongoing project where we're developing reports and research, how-tos, sharing funding opportunities. So it's just a way to support the nonprofit housing sector. Looking forward, well, there's a lot on the plate. I guess what I would highlight is doing grant application. Right now, I'm like knee-deep in grant applications to get funding for the land use evaluation. And I think there's great opportunity to get some provincial funding for that. I'm also working on a work plan for the Sunshine Coast Homelessness Action Committee. Right now, I want to put together a short-term strategy just based on the needs assessment work that we're doing. We'll have the bigger picture in May, but I think right now we know enough to at least highlight some of those key priorities that need to happen right away. Other than that, in terms of, well, there's a lot going on. The needs analysis is still underway, and of course the webinar version of the housing info fair. So that's it, as fast as I could, guys.
Wow. Very fast for very, very complicated file, I guess, if that's the right term. Council, how would you like to proceed? Councillor Bell.
So first I want to acknowledge, I have made a few notes, I'm just going to refer to them, just the outstanding work that's done by the Cover the Coast team, SCRD, District of Sechelt staff, nonprofit partners. I know there's a lot more involved, but it has been incredible work that's been done on this plan. And it's so critical that we work together with all levels of government and our nonprofit partners and our community, to prioritize, obviously, greater affordability. And I think this plan is really going to help us develop the context of our planning and our policy. So before I have a couple of comments on the different priorities. What is today, just to clarify the purpose of today, is that today just to ask questions, make comments, that kind of thing?
Please.
Thanks. Yeah, SCRD and Cover the Coast would value the District of Sechelt's comments on priorities, gaps, or other aspects of the plan as we look to move forward on the actions that are included in there.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Okay, and just from my understanding, you've highlighted three
Councillor.
priorities at this point.
Councillor Bell.
Do you see those as being your priorities? Is this what you'd like us to comment on? It's a big plan, so I'm just trying to see how I can best help.
Ready for that?
Thank you for the question. Thank you, Chair. Back in December, when the Housing Action Plan was brought forward to the SCRD's committee, the discussion focused on prioritizing 4 of the 6 items under the local government policy framework area, and those were referenced in the letter to you from Chair Leonard Lee. From our point of view, interested in comments on any part of the plan, but also noting or sharing back that those were the areas that the Regional District Board was most interested in. Thanks.
Yeah, great.
Chair, I'm just going to continue. So I'm just on priority 1 then. I just wanted to comment on, first of all, I think it's a great start. I think that's a great priority because the data is certainly going to help us guide, in terms of any land acquisition decisions. The other thing that I really like is the fact that it'll help inform the OCPs. And I think this is essential because in order for this strategy to be effective, it needs to be aligned to our current policies. And it needs to reflect our strategic plan initiatives, our budget resource and allocations. So I really like that that's included in here.
Great. Thank you.
Carry on.
Just before you carry on, any questions from others?
Yeah. Well.
Please, Councillor Rowe.
Thanks for the presentation. I think the work that's been done on housing is the best representative of the regional work that's gone on in the last 4 years. And I really, really am a strong advocate for seeing that continue. I think land use as the #1 priority. I 100% agree with that. That's all we keep hearing back in conversations is about the lack of land. So let's just see exactly what that looks like. A question, on one of your early slides, you talk about measurement indicators started to show success of the plan. Don't want to put you on the spot, but can you give me an example or two of what that might look like?
Well, some data that we're collecting, sorry,
Yeah.
turn on. Some data that we've been collecting actually for quite some time are the listings, rental listings that are either on Craigslist or through social media, but through all the networks, and keeping track of how many houses are available for rent each month. That's one of the outcomes of some local government policy.
So really tangible things that the public will be able to see, how they're, how the funding has, will provide some real data that they can look at. And as far as the essential worker housing, I know you've had a lot of landlords list. Have you had some matches as well?
Yes.
Perfect.
We're still reaching out to the essential service organizations who are, as you know, very busy and challenging to connect with them to get that data, because that's part of what we need to collect, is to really understand what those outcomes look like.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. That's it for now.
So you have had some matches, though?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Okay. Ready to go back to Councillor Bell? Your list of...
Oh, yeah. I just,
microphone, please.
Microphone through the chair.
Thank you.
I'm back. So just on the priority 2, I was noticing about the amenity contribution. My comment was just more around in the report. You had mentioned the Cowichan Regional District as an example. I believe the town of Gibson did a policy some time ago. Now, whether it's different with an RD policy, it may be, but I just thought that I would put out there because I know that they have just revised that in November of 2021. So,
Okay, I'll look into that.
yeah.
I'm not unaware of that.
Okay, yeah.
I
By
did
the-
have one more ask.
Just,
Out of turn.
can I just, acknowledge that Councillor Inkster joined us a few minutes ago. Sorry, I didn't see you on the screen, Councillor Inkster, but welcome.
My ask is to get some letters of support, and I'm not sure what the formality is for that. These are for grant submissions.
Okay.
And do I need to name them now so that you have that in
I
on?
think Councillor Bell has it written already. She's probably signed it. No, you can send a suggestion, I think is fair to us, and, we'll
thank you.
expedite it, yeah. So picking up on that, just on the town of Gibson's, where are you? You've noticed noted your, plans to meet with the other local governments. Where are you in that process, with our Shishal friends and neighbors and town of Gibson's and so on?
The referral was sent to the other local governments, and unless a response has been received in the most recent of days, I don't think I've heard back from town of Gibson's.
So we're number one?
Sorry?
We're number one?
You are number one, Mayor. And I wasn't expecting to hear back from the Seychelles Nation during their election period, but
Of course.
we'll be following up.
Right. But they're an integral player in the solutions, I think. Okay. Good. Councillor McLaughlin, please.
Yes, thank you. Also, first off, thank you very much for your very hard work, and it's so timely with the issues we know with homelessness and affordability and things. And I was just wondering, with your vision, you say appropriate, attainable, and safe housing options across the spectrum to meet the needs of all community members. So on the one hand, we have kind of a focus, but on the other hand, it seems very wide open. I'm just wondering what you mean by across the spectrum.
I mean that, so with housing, we have market housing and we have subsidized housing. So with subsidized housing, you know, there's emergency housing, deeply subsidized, you know, affordable, you know, below market and market. So there's a whole spectrum of housing in that area.
Okay.
For market housing, there's a desperate need for affordable rental housing that is market. It's not subsidized, but it's market housing, but it is critical for workforce housing or for both local businesses and essential service organizations. So we're looking at the whole sort of spectrum of needs.
Okay, that's great. I mean, it's good to have clarification on that. One thing I was going to suggest as well, because I also have a background in planning, if you're looking at an inventory, also look for the services around areas that are going to support your priority clients, if you want to look at them that way. And also maybe in terms of not just public housing or institutional housing, but even other lots nearby these places that are currently, you know, maybe they're just single-family homes, but they could be much more, and they're in a great location. So it's good to look a little bit beyond just the institutional and public housing as well, so that we can build, find extra opportunities and not have those get rezoned or taken up for something that we actually have a much more public interest need for those without, you know, some highlighting it from an agency like yours. It's kind of hard to make the case. That's great work. Just kind of an observation I have. So just keep up the good work. I don't see why we wouldn't want to support it. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you very much. Just to kind of build on that, through the inventory, we are going to do, part of that is an assessment process where there will be a criteria that looks at proximity to services or to, you know, to hospital, et cetera, so that we can have an objective lens for identifying the best use of property. I love your idea about looking at adjacent lots, so really.
Especially
Great.
near school.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor, what's your name again? Councillor Shepherd?
Thanks very much, again, as other councillors have mentioned, for the work that you do. And you've brought so many threads together here, and it's such a critical time. One question, actually two questions. One on the inventory that I'm a little bit confused. is the SERD doing its own inventory plan across the region, but you're also working with them, or because you're raising funding separately from the SCRD? So just curious how you work together.
Well, initially, we were struggling with what the best process was to undertake this project. And should it be overseen by the SCRD, or should it be led by a nonprofit? And we came to the conclusion that it made the most sense for it to be led by a nonprofit. Once that data is collected, it will be housed at the regional district and accessible to all local government and community organizations. But that just made the most sense in terms of fund development.
Please.
Sorry, one last question. In putting together the data on what's available in terms of rental units, do you look at the impact of the short-term rental bylaws that have been brought in by the region and the various municipalities?
That's the intention. The data is being shared with all of the local government planning departments for that very reason, because it's a way to evaluate the outcomes of those policy changes.
Great.
Thank you. Most kind. For me, I guess what I see looking at this overall, there's a dearth of builders and the commercial sector. Now, I happen to know that on the emergency housing action table at the beginning, the Seashell and I think Gibson's Chambers of Commerce were represented. But, you know, a lot of this involves building new homes, and, you know, for that we need builders. We need a lot more than volunteers, and we need funding, of course. But I'm wondering, how are you going to involve that segment of our community, the builders and, and the industry in general?
There's a few ways that we're doing that. We did actually quite a deep dive, interviewing a lot of the local contractors to understand from their position what were the major barriers for their, for their success in terms of developing on the coast, looking at kind of government processes, that kind of thing. So we did get a lot of input from that was reflected back through these regional meetings, intergovernmental meetings. So that's one. And with our, the housing info fair and the work that we're doing forward on that, it's all partnerships with the kind of builders in the private sector. In terms of bringing them kind of on board, looking forward, my goal is, this is where it's such a puzzle, right? Like right now, we need to start thinking, because we are going to have an understanding of the land that could be repurposed, federal or provincial land. We will understand what those needs are and what needs to be done in terms of bricks and mortar, in terms of housing and those services. We need to figure out the partnerships that need to happen to drive those projects. And we need to start thinking about that now. So that's the next step, is really identifying who are those major players, be they nonprofit, either the builders, and start preparing for when we actually have all of this data and land in the future, so that we're not starting from scratch at that point.
Right. So I didn't see much reference to what you just said in the document, but you are intending to reach out to the community that's actually going to build these things for us.
Well, we will. It's just it comes down to resources and my time too, and I'm being very particular about how I spend my time. And right now, I feel the land use, like getting funding for land use evaluation, moving forward on the needs assessment. Really what's been prioritized in the plan is a priority, and I think I'll be able to kind of come up for air in a few months and really start to think about those next steps.
Okay, thanks. I'd be remiss, since I think all of council got a question from a member of the public asking, they didn't see any reference to how to like we talk about, or in your report, you talk about protecting rentals. But the observation was that the current legislation, provincial legislation, makes it so difficult to be a long-term landlord. And so I know I'd be in trouble if I didn't bring it up on the person's behalf. Have you reached out, or do you intend to reach out to the land? I think it used to be, Art, thank you, used to be called the landlord and tenant people, but to make it clear that we do need to support the landlords as well, or people will just say, no, not going to rent.
It's definitely one of the barriers that came up. Again, we did a survey with homeowners to better understand why they're not renting out their suites, and that was number one, probably. You know, a sense of risk, and a sense of, I guess, lack of protection through the Landlord Tenancy Act.
Protection for the landlords, yes.
Yeah, there was definitely, that was a you know, some of the feedback that we received. So what we did, I guess our strategy around that right now is to try to mitigate those risks by educating landlords and to understand best practices in terms of creating a more successful relationship with a tenant at the very beginning. How do you mitigate those risks through, you know, doing the vetting process, all those processes to make it more successful, bringing property managers in that can help to educate people as well. I do agree with you that there needs to be deeper work in terms of looking at the act itself. When the Minister Eby was here, I did bring that up with him. And, yeah, I agree.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, Council, anything else? I think this is, yes, Councillor McLaughlin.
Yes, through the chair. I mean, I know our housing issues are severe and important, but we also have something that other places don't have, which is a severe water issue problem. So we'll also get the problem where if we have development and promote housing, even garden suites, that people are going to say, but wait a minute, what about my garden and the water from my garden? And the fact that the summer we're going to, looks like we're probably going to be worried about our taps running dry again. So I don't know what kind of solution you have for that. I mean, the only thing I could really propose is that, which I propose anyway, is not having so many short-term rentals. I mean, people built suites for a reason.
Councillor McLaughlin, what about for?
So, you know, and I think in the SCRD chair's letter, he does refer to the issue of SDRs taking those suites. And so it's something to be aware of because, you know, we can't just pretend like we don't have these issues. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, my turn. Okay, thanks. All right, anything else? And with our thanks for your time and your energy, Kelly, especially, I know you put your heart into this, so thanks for all you're doing, and not to make light of what you're doing, Mr. Hall. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your support.
Great. Council will move on then to adjournment. Moved, seconded, all in favor? We're adjourned. And do we have anybody in the gallery?